There's an old idea that the things we're drawn to without thinking say more about us than the things we choose carefully. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I've watched it happen enough times at estate tables to believe there's something real underneath it. Before I explain anything, actually try this. Picture 4 old rings sitting in front of you. A 1920s Art Deco filigree ring, delicate and crowded with tiny hand-cut detail. A plain 1960s platinum solitaire ring, heavy and cold to the touch. A gold-orange blossom ring from the early 1900s with a warm floral pattern chased into the band. And a small 1950s illusion set diamond ring, quiet at first glance, but somehow catching more light than you'd expect. Don't think it through. Just notice which one your eye goes to first, and hold on to that while I go through all 4, because I promise there's more waiting at the end than just a personality read. If you were drawn to the Art Deco filigree ring, that piece dates back to the 1920s, and the instinct that pulled you toward it usually says something real. That kind of hand-pierced filigree work, cut with tools and dyes that simply don't exist anymore, tends to catch the eye of people who notice detail everywhere, not just in jewelry. You're probably someone who reads a room quickly, picks up on small inconsistencies other people miss, and gets genuinely uncomfortable with things that feel rushed or careless. There's a quiet perfectionism in that kind of attraction, the sense that if something's going to exist, it should be done with real care. The honest challenge that tends to come with it is that all that noticing can turn inward too easily into a habit of picking apart your own work long after everyone else has already decided it's good enough. That same instinct for detail is exactly what pays off if you're actually holding one of these rings. Look closely at the stone under strong light. If it's an old European cut, the facets won't line up in perfect machine rows. They'll wander slightly, the way handwriting does, because it was shaped by a person rather than a laser. A 1-carat old European cut stone in decent color has sold for around $3,000, 10 to 15% above what the same size modern round brilliant would bring, sitting right next to it in a case. The lacework you were drawn to in the first place is the same lacework that tells a dealer exactly what decade made this ring, and that decade is doing real work on the price. The metal itself can carry a clue too. Fine filigree work like this often lean toward white gold or platinum rather than yellow gold, since the paler metal let the intricate cutwork read more clearly against the stone, so it's worth noticing whether that cooler tone runs through the whole setting, not just the center stone. If you were drawn to the platinum solitaire ring instead, that's usually a piece from the 1960s, and the pull toward it tends to say something different. People who go for the quiet, unadorned option are often the ones who don't need to explain themselves constantly. You trust substance over decoration, and you're probably the person in most rooms who says less than everyone else, but means more when you do say something. There's real confidence in choosing plain when everything around you is trying to be loud, and it usually comes from having already proven to yourself that you don't need the room's attention to know your own worth. The honest challenge here is that understated can tip into guarded if you're not careful. And the people who love you sometimes have to work harder than they should to find out what's actually going on underneath the calm. Checking for that same substance over show is exactly how you find out what it's actually worth. Set the ring on a kitchen scale if you have one, or just pick it up and notice the weight. Platinum sits noticeably heavier in the hand than white gold of the same size, and that heft is usually the first sign before you ever find a mark. Then look for a small stamp reading plat, or 950 somewhere inside the band. A plain platinum solitaire with a modest stone from this era has sold for $1,500 to $4,000. And platinum pieces from established houses have historically held their resale value far better than most other metals, some retaining 80 to 90% of their worth on the second-hand market, which means a ring that looks like nothing more than a plain cold band might be quietly worth several times what a flashier piece beside it would bring. Even the color under close light gives it away before you find any stamp at all. Platinum keeps a cool, slightly grayish white that never shifts, while white gold, even well made, tends to carry the faintest warm undertone once the rhodium plating on top starts to wear thin after years of everyday use. If the gold orange blossom ring pulled you in, that floral band is a design an American maker named Traub out of Detroit became known for in the early 20th century. Being drawn to something floral and warm instead of geometric or plain tends to point toward people who lead with feeling rather than logic first. You probably notice emotional undercurrents in a conversation before anyone says anything directly, and you likely put real thought into small, personal gestures, the kind other people barely register but that mean everything to the person receiving them. The honest challenge that tends to travel with this one is that all that emotional attentiveness can leave you more affected by other people's moods than you'd like to admit, even on days when you'd rather not carry anyone else's weight. Authenticating one of these actually calls on that same emotional attentiveness, just pointed at the ring instead of a person. The orange blossom motif itself was copied widely, so the flowers alone don't confirm anything. Take a loupe or even a strong magnifying glass to the inside of the shank and look for a small maker's signature near the carat stamp. Since Traub's molds were destroyed when the company was sold in 1990, nothing new has been made since, and a genuinely signed piece has sold anywhere from around $400 at the lower end up to nearly $6,000 at the top, depending on the design and condition, all resting on a signature most people would never think to look for. The depth of the chasing is worth a look too. Earlier, more carefully made pieces tend to have flowers carved deep enough to catch a real shadow when you tilt the band under a lamp, while a shallower, flatter version of the same motif is generally a sign of a later, less careful reproduction. And if the illusion set diamond ring caught you, that small, quiet piece that somehow throws more light than its size would suggest is very likely from the 1950s, and there's something fitting about being drawn to a ring built entirely around the idea of appearing bigger than it actually is. People who notice this kind of clever design tend to be sharp about how things are put together, curious about the mechanics behind an effect rather than just the effect itself. You're probably someone who asks how something works, not just whether it works, and you likely have a quiet appreciation for cleverness over pure size or spectacle. The honest challenge here is that all that analytical noticing can occasionally tip into skepticism, a habit of looking for the trick even in moments that are exactly what they appear to be, sometimes at the cost of just letting something be simple and enjoying it without immediately taking it apart to see how it works. That same appreciation for craftsmanship is worth turning toward the ring itself, and here I have to be honest with you up front. Illusion set rings are not the highest earner on this list. The illusion setting was invented by a French jeweler back in the 1860s, specifically to make a smaller stone appear significantly larger, using a shaped metal plate worked around the edges of the stone itself. Tilt the ring under a lamp and look for the fine seam where that metal plate rings the stone. On a well-made piece, that seam is cut with real precision, not stamped out flat. A genuine 1950s illusion set ring in good condition typically sells for $150 to $600, modest compared to the others, and I won't pretend otherwise. But sold as just a tiny stone by someone who never checked, it brings closer to nothing at all. Recognized for the engineered idea it actually is, it becomes a signed piece of design history instead, worth several times what an uninformed seller would have let it go for. Even the marketing claim that made this design famous, that it makes a stone look up to 50% larger, is worth taking with a grain of salt, since that number was always closer to a sales pitch than a measured fact. The craftsmanship underneath that pitch, though, was never an exaggeration, and it's the part that actually holds up under a loop 80 years later. Here's the part that actually ties all four of these together, and it's the same thing whether we're talking about a personality or a price tag. None of these rings were ever really about how big or flashy they looked sitting in a case. The Art Deco piece hides its value in handwork most people walk straight past. The platinum band hides it in weight and a 2-letter stamp. The orange blossom ring hides it in a signature smaller than a grain of rice. And the illusion setting hides it in a seam most people would never think to tilt toward the light. Every one of them rewards the same habit, actually looking closely instead of assuming you already know what you're seeing, and that's just as true of the ring you were drawn to as it is of the person who was drawn to it. So if you tried this honestly, picked a ring, and felt like the reed landed a little closer than you expected, that's not really a coincidence. The things we notice first usually aren't random, and neither is what turns out to be sitting quietly inside them. Tell me down in the comments which ring you picked and whether the reed felt true, because I'm genuinely curious how many of you land on the same one, and whether the ring that pulled you in tonight is anything like what's actually sitting in your own jewelry box right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications, because there's another one of these coming soon, and you're going to want to see which piece pulls you in next time.